Bernardo, you are famously a critic of panpsychism, even though externally somebody who's not really familiar with it wouldn't see a whole lot of air between panpsychism and idealism that you espouse, and that both are rejecting materialism. But in having rejected materialism, you feel very strongly that panpsychism does not have enough metaphysical power or explanatory power to deal with reality. Why so?
Panpsychism, and by that I mean constitutive micropsychism, it doesn't explain anything. It just adds consciousness either as an extra property or as the essence of material entities, irreducible material entities like the elementary subatomic particles. So you're not accounting for anything, you're not reducing anything, you're just adding more stuff to the givens, to the brute facts of nature. I think it also faces an analytical issue almost as strong as the hard problem of consciousness, which is the combination problem. There is no coherent, that may be necessarily so. It's impossible to have a coherent story for how fundamentally distinct fields of subjectivity can combine to form a seemingly unified one. But my main critique against panpsychism is that it is physically incoherent. It assumes that the structure of the physical world fundamentally is the structure of little billiard balls, little particles with discrete spatial boundaries. That's not how physics understands particles. The word particle is a throwback to the late 19th century that we still use metaphorically.
Yeah,
they're only fields.
I don't think they would object. If I were a panpsychist, that wouldn't bother me at all. I mean, you can have quantum fields, you can have whatever else. You just have a new characteristic of them that they didn't have before.
Well, for the panpsychist explains why my consciousness is disjoint from yours, why I can't read your thoughts, because consciousness is a fundamental property of the material particles here, and yours have another consciousness because they are
whatever
there.
Constitute the particles. I mean, we're using particles. I mean, particles are excitations of quantum fields.
If particles are just excitations of quantum fields, and we know quantum fields are spatially unbound. They span the whole of nature. The same quantum fields underlie my brain.
It's a probabilistic thing, so they're not going to be. They're not going to be the probability of them finding here Born's rule and all that. You know.
If you want to make consciousness a fundamental property of a existent, of a thing, that thing has to be the field, and then consciousness is a property of the entire field. And then a panpsychist cannot account for why my thoughts here are separate from your thoughts there, because it's the field that is consciousness, and it's the same fields underlying my brain and your brain.
But the field is concentrated more in one part. Probabilistically, it can be anywhere in existence. I agree with that, but
and then if you say that consciousness arises from configurations or excitations of the field, then you're back to the original problem. Now consciousness is reducible because the field itself is not conscious, only certain particles of excitation. You're back to the hard problem.
You always have the combination problem, no doubt about that.
No, you're back to the hard problem again. How can consciousness arise out of particular configurations of the field?
Because you're defining it that way. That's your definition. You're defining it. Just like you define idealism in that way. Your universal subjectivity is the same definition.
No. I say there is only one field of subjectivity, and dissociation accounts for the boundaries of cognition.
But when you're saying there's only one universal subjectivity, that's the same thing as a panpsychist saying that there is a consciousness component of the ultimate reality.
But the story of the panpsychist is internally inconsistent. It's incoherent. It presupposes that consciousness is bound by the boundaries of elementary subatomic particles. That cannot be the case because elementary subatomic particles are not things, they are ripples on the field. So if they want to attribute consciousness as a fundamental property of something, it has to be the field.
Okay, I agree with that.
And then my consciousness should not be disjoint from yours because it's the same field. There should be only a universal consciousness.
You can make the same argument that everything should blend together in terms of the physical world. They don't. I'm different from the column.
No, Robert.
This column is different from that column.
The move of the panpsychist is to find a irreducible aspect of the physical world, and then attribute consciousness to it as a fundamental property or the essence of it. Particles cannot be that because particles don't exist. particles are a shorthand for localized field excitations.
Right.
So if there is something to have a property, it has to be the field.
I agree with that.
And then the whole combination issue, the whole separation of subjectivities falls apart, because those fields span the whole of nature. If the fields are conscious, then there are only universal consciousnesses.
Okay, but what is there a difference between the difference between those two columns under panpsychism? Let's say panpsychism is real. We have two different columns. They're different. I see them different. And my mind and your mind, they're different. Is there a difference between those two analogies?
For the panpsychist, the columns would be an agglomeration of elementary subatomic particles, each with their own subjectivities, but they don't combine.
Right.
In you and I, they do combine.
Right.
But all of this presupposes that subjectivity is bound by these little elementary subatomic particles, which don't exist.
So if I were a panpsychist, which I'm not, okay, let me get that straight, I'm not. But if I were, I wouldn't be bothered by that. Again, I'd have a quantum field be the fundamental thing, if that's the fundamental thing of physics, and you can't be sure of that.
Then you're an idealist.
Sure. Well, you know,
because the quantum field is universal. So, universal consciousness, 17 of them.
Okay, let's go on. We don't quite agree, but okay, let's go on to Cosmopsychism, which says that it's not the individual particles that have the proto-consciousness that combine together, but the whole universe is one subjective entity. Sounds like idealism.
Yeah, and it's still different.
It's different because the physical world is not a reflection of the physical world. It has reality in itself as well.
Yeah, I don't think that the structure of consciousness is the structure of the physical world, because the physical world, in my view, is an appearance. It's a cognitive representation. It's not the thing in itself. So to attribute to consciousness, the subjectivity, the structure of the world, would be like attributing to the sky the structure of the dashboard in an airplane. It doesn't make sense. One is the representation of the other. Or to attributing to me the structure of the pixels on your phone if you talk to me via video call. And my image on your phone is a representation of me.
Right.
The structure of that image, the pixels on your phone, do not reflect my structure. So for me, the structure of the physical world is like the pixels on your phone. It's the structure of the representation, not of the thing represented, which is subjectivity itself. So that would be the difference between idealism and cosmopsychism.
I agree with that being the difference. And I agree that there's no scientific way to distinguish between them. We're dealing with the internal consistency of each one. Your claim is that there is an inconsistency or even an incoherence in the panpsychist view. The panpsychist view would have the advantage of at least having a greater reality to the physical world than you would.
I think the physical world obviously exists as a representation. It's undeniable. It's our interface to reality.
Yeah.
I don't call it an illusion anymore that an airplane's dashboard is an illusion. The mistake is to take the dashboard for the sky. The dashboard isn't an illusion, it just isn't the sky. Nature is not deceiving us. It's just we taking the dashboard for the sky. We are being fools.
Let me ask you this: if there was something that happened to your brain that prevented you from even thinking about idealism, so idealism is completely off the charts in terms of your suite of
options.
explanatory options, would you be a panpsychist? Would that be your next choice?
No.
What would you be?
I would. I'm tempted to say a materialist, but my materialist would be inconsistent with academic materialism, because I would then take.
Look, that's a fair answer. You don't have to explain it, because I'm giving you a very impossible situation. So, if you're not going to be an idealist, you will not be a panpsychist. You would be a materialist. I'd probably
a
be
naive materialist. I would think that the qualities of my perception, the colors I see, the melodies I hear, the flavors I feel, are really out there in the world.
Kind of a first order.
A naive realism, which is completely impossible, totally untenable.
Right.
But if you take idealism off the table,
it'd be your next best choice.
It's a horrible choice. It's an impossible choice. But that's what I would fall back to.
I'd probably be a dualist, but we'll forget about that.
Now that I wouldn't be. It's too unparsimonious for my character.